Hi again, everyone. So today I will be talking about the Boston Celtics of the NBA during Boston Week. So looking at the Celtics, currently their record is 19-31, so they're third in the Atlantic Division, but the Raptors have a pretty good stronghold on that division, so I don't think they'll be able to come back in the second half of the season and try to get into that first position in that division because they're sitting 11th in the East. So they're only a few spots out of a playoff spot. They're not too many games back because the East is arguably the weaker conference between the East and the West. So even if the Celtics can manage to get to a 500 record, or even 5 games below 500, they might be able to squeeze in at the 8th spot there and make the playoffs. So we'll see what happens with them there. With February only being a little about a third of the way in, I'm going to look back at some of their stats from January to kind of compare and see why their record is so poor with them being 12 games below 500. So when you look at their January stats, they had 13.6 turnovers to only 7.4 steals. So if you're turning the ball over twice as much as you're stealing the ball from your opponent, you're probably not going to win too many games or have a very successful record. So that's important for them to find a way to control the ball better and create more steals. They also only had a 74.7% free throw from the line kind of thing. So if your team can find a way to get above 80% from the line, those are easy points right there. So if you look at adding another 5% to your free throws, that could be another 5-6 points a game, and that could lead to some more wins. Because again, just like in most sports. You only need obviously a point to win, and in some NBA games there are differences within a basket or two, and that could easily have been 3 or 4 made field goals that you missed. So find a way to get the easy free throws into the net will help them obviously get more wins and see where they can go with the second half of the season. Looking at their players, I'm going to talk a lot about their younger guys, Tyler Zeller, Jared Solinger, and the Canadian Kelly Olynyk. Those 3 players combined have 5 NBA years experience, so they're a very young team. Jared Solinger is leading the team in a lot of categories, 14.4 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. So he's obviously, for a young guy, he's going to have some talent, and all 3 of these guys have some upside. Zeller's 9.7 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, and Olynyk is 11.1 points per game and 5.4 rebounds. So again, these kids are young. They're going to take time to develop. They're going to take time to build some chemistry. They do have some veterans on the roster to help them. Brandon Bass, Tayshaun Prince, obviously they give them some nice veteran presence on the team. I think a big hit to the team is obviously Gerald Wallace being injured. Has affected their ability to win some games and have not an all-star caliber player, but another veteran player on the floor kind of thing. So it's important to note these players are young. Keep an eye on them. I think Celtics Nation have some great young players there that are going to develop and create some chemistry amongst them and mature and get some NBA experience. So in 3 or 4 years, when these guys have been in the league for 5+ years or so, if they're still with the Celtics, they'll have created a good core group of guys that can take them into the future. And it's nice to watch the Celtics because they got a Canadian playing on their team there in Kelly Olynyk, so I always like watching teams that have Canadian content or Canadian talent on their roster. So hopefully Olynyk will continue to develop into the player I think the Celtics expected him to be when they drafted him. So that's good their players now. Looking at some of the trades and some of the acquisitions they've done this year, obviously December 18th, the big trade when they traded Rajon Rondo and Powell to the Mavericks. They got back Crowder, Wright, and Jameer Nelson, so they got back a few players, but I think the big things in that trade was they're getting a first overall pick this upcoming year in 2015. Not first overall, sorry, first round pick in 2015, and then a second round pick in 2016. So those are some of the assets they got back from Dallas when they traded Rondo. Then on January 13th, after they got Jameer Nelson from the Mavericks about a month earlier, they traded him to the Nuggets for Nate Robinson, and he never even played a game for the Celtics. They waived his contract a couple days later. So the Rondo trade, like I said, the players they got outside of Jameer Nelson, who they again traded a month later, I think were kind of nice, obviously, to have on the roster. But I think the picks are the main things you're going to want to look at with that trade with Rondo that happened at the just before the Christmas holiday there. But looking at those picks coming from Dallas, Dallas is currently 35-19 and they're 5th in the West. So even though it is a first round pick coming up this year, depending on where Dallas finishes, that might be like 20th overall or something, which you can still get a very good NBA talent player with that. And depending on where Boston finishes this year, if they can turn around in the second half, that's great. If not, they'll probably end up with a top 10 pick, which is great when you got these three young guys in Solinger, Olenek, and Zeller to continue to build, continue to rebuild, and get these guys some experience and get them on the court and see where they can take it. So I think, again, with Celtics Nation and Celtics fans, you got to be patient with these guys. See what this, you're going to get 2 first-round picks this upcoming year with the one from Dallas, so see what kind of guys you can draft from that. Your scouts, obviously, are going to have a lot of hard work and put in the hours to find out where the talent is, especially when you look at players from Europe and stuff. I know people think, we should stay in the NCAA and draft players that have played college ball in the States because they're more NBA ready, which is true. But how many projects does the Celtics want? You already have 3 guys on your team that are, like I said, combined to 5 years experience. You already got a lot of young talent in there. Do you want to draft somebody who you think is still 2 or 3 years away, who plays in Brazil or Argentina or somewhere over in Europe, and say, this guy has some skills, but I think he's a couple years away? Develop Olenek and Solinger and Zeller, and then bring that guy in? Or do you draft another guy with a top 10 pick who can step in and obviously support and make an impact on your team? Those are kind of questions that I would consider if I was sitting in the Celtics GM office, is what do I do with these guys that I have? Clearly, like I said, young team, you got to be patient, let them develop. You don't want to make a blockbuster deal and find a way that you could acquire, an NBA All-Star, but you're giving up all your assets that you've had with Solinger and Olenek or whatever, right? Somebody would offer you a trade and say, like, let's say Cleveland called you and said, hey, LeBron's not working out, we'll give you him, but we want Solinger, Olenek, and Zeller in return. It sounds tempting. I wouldn't do it. You're giving up all your assets for LeBron, who, is a great player, or a single, MVP, All-Star caliber player. That's great if you can get him on your roster. That's going to bring in fans. It's going to create a lot of hype, but you're giving away the farm system, is what they would say in baseball, but you're for basketball terms, you're giving away everything you've tried to develop. You've acquired these picks and you've got these young players. Let them grow, let them develop, wait a few years, and then who knows, then maybe you'll have some cap space because a lot of these young players, they haven't proven themselves yet, so they're not going to want the 5-year, $80 million contracts because they haven't earned it, they haven't deserved it. So if you grow with these young guys, wait a few years, build some cap space, then maybe you can sign a veteran guy who's an all-star onto your team. So again, that's another thing to consider. The Celtics obviously have been an amazing NBA team over the years. They got 17 NBA championships in the whole decade of the 60s. There was only 1 year they didn't win it, and that was in the 66-67 season. So that's impressive. The 60s were the Celtics decade, if you were to label it. Most recently, obviously, they won the championship in 07 and 08 with Garnett and Pierce and Allen and all those veterans on the team. So I think that's another thing to recognize, is teams who win championships have good chemistry, veterans who have been in the league for a while, and all-stars. This year, Boston doesn't have a single player representing them at the All-Star game, at least in the game itself. I'm not sure if they might have players representing them in skills contests or stuff like that, but in the game itself, they don't have an all-star there to represent them. So again, it's a young team. You're not going to expect a lot from them. I think that's what fans can anticipate is, hey, we got all these young kids, they're talented, we got to wait a couple years and see what they can do. If come 2017, 2018, they're still not making the playoffs and they're still having a rough year, then I would start to get frustrated if I was a Boston fan. But clearly, you've won 17 NBA championships. You got loyal fans. You got a great city, and good young players to build around now. So let's see what can happen for them in the second half. Let's see what kind of picks they get this upcoming year. With their first round pick they got from Dallas, like I said, they're going to have 2, so they could have a top 10, and then probably somewhere around the 20 to 25 range is where they'll get another pick in there, depending on how far Dallas makes into the playoffs. And who knows, Dallas could have a horrible second half and miss the playoffs, and then the Celtics could have 2 top 15 picks, which would be great. So again, let's look forward to this upcoming season, the second half. Let's watch these young players grow. And thanks again for listening in. And like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614. And I will talk to you again at the end of the week with my last Boston team, the Boston Bruins of the NHL. Thanks again. Bye.